Like many other viewers who found interest in cases of the many sick and psychopathic ways someone could do to another, I don't really have a good enough reason for me to be so engrossed in the content except for it's interesting. At first, it was just a one-off thing. The first true crime I remember listening to was the case about how a 15-year-old secondary student planned his own murder. How could you not be interested in the case just by hearing the title? A young teenager planning his own murder. I just had to know what happened. And so it begins, with a simple search of the murder leading me to a podcast talking about the murder, even having different voices acting as the different people involved in the case, using clever wording to build suspense, making me intently listen to the entire podcast. I started my little journey scouring the internet for more true crime stories. I started listening to them because the stories were just so unbelievable. I couldn't fathom people being so insane, stabbing and killing for reasons as benign as "I don't want her as my friend anymore." The entire true crime stories were like another universe opened for me. A dangerous one I could enjoy from the safety of my bed. Then many listens later, the true crime videos just play in the background as I do my work, only capturing my attention when the YouTuber talked about how someone got murdered or kidnapped or thrown into a vat of acid. Just anything shocking enough to pique my interest. I don't really remember the cases I've listened to, all I remember was they were really gruesome. But the more cases I listened to, the less I cared about the crimes. I unknowingly found myself starting to search for more sick cases, more cases that are more shocking, and more gruesome than just plain murder. What about those that involve kidnapping? Or stolen identities? Or weird torture methods? I wasn't aware that my searches, and my thoughts when deciding which video to click on became a little strange. No longer was it just because I wanted to learn more about the case. I started watching and listening to the videos because it entertained me. I slowly reduced these people, the victims' pain and misery, to entertainment, and I wasn't even aware of it. I effectively reduced their painful experiences, their families' grief, their unfair murders and tragedies to just clickbait titles, and I was still just gleefully clicking on video after video, seeing which case had the most shock factors. It wasn't until I branched out to true crime documentaries that I realized that the entire concept of true crime videos was simply sick. The true crime documentary that made me completely abandon listening to any more true crime stories or podcasts was Netflix's Don't Fuck with Cats. Like many other people stuck in quarantine then, there was only so much one could do within the confines of their walls, but fortunately for the internet, there is never-ending entertainment 24/7. And still very much interested in true crime documentaries, I decided that for my next entertaining binge session to finally catch up and watch the highly raved documentary. The pacing was just right, the interviews were neatly conducted, and the focal point being the internet made it fresh. After watching the documentary, I thought it was entertaining. Which was when the problem dawned on me, that I thought a documentary about someone's death was entertaining. Entertaining. It was as if I was really simply watching a TV show and not a part of the cruel reality someone had to suffer through. The cliffhanger the director chose for each episode worked like magic. It successfully got me hooked on the next part. And that was it, 3-hour-long episodes of some crazy psycho. I got to know everything about him. His age, his height, how he writes, how he talks, his childhood, his favorite color, even down to his favorite movies, just about everything shy of his favorite porn websites to visit. 3 hours long in-depth documentary about the psycho, and finally when the documentary came to talk about the murder that made him infamous, with all the emphasis being placed on how sick his methods were. How he lured his victim, how he killed his victim, how he disposed of his victim, and then the documentary started talking about his escape from the authorities. At the very end of the documentary, they showed a clip of the victim's friend talking about his life, and his family, which then made me finally realize, throughout the entire documentary, the victim was mentioned for maybe less than 5 minutes. From this documentary I know everything about a psycho killer, but nothing about the victim. I know nothing about the victim except that he was a shock factor. You thought that was it, didn't you? Stick to the psycho's crimes. After watching and hearing even just briefly about what he did to the victim from the documentary, I couldn't help but think about the victim. How his parents painstakingly raised him and sent him abroad so he could pursue and live out a better life, only to be met with such a cruel end. It was only after watching the documentary that I finally truly realized that something I had chosen for entertainment, something for me to simply watch and forget, was someone else's cruel reality. The victim's family would have to live the rest of their lives knowing that their son's death was being sensationalized for the entire world, and that his snuff film is still out there too. The moments that he was taken are probably saved in another random sicko's hard drive, playing over and over again. And by just being interested in true crime and choosing to watch the documentary, I was participating in the exploitation of the victim and prolonging the family's suffering by reducing their son's death to just another shocking part of my day. I didn't have this realization because of the weird gotcha moment the documentary tried to flip onto its viewers in the last second. It was the fact that after they revealed the horrific murder, the victim doesn't get mentioned again until the last 20 seconds of the show. I even had to hear how the psycho's mother is still defending her psycho, but I know nothing about the victim. An entire man's life was robbed, and all everyone would remember about him was how he was brutally killed, or how he just became another climax in the autobiography of his killer. Just another life taken along with some cats and a dog. It was then I realized, by clicking on this true crime documentary and all the other true crime videos and podcasts I had the listening to, I had been part of the exploitation of people's deaths, all for my own enjoyment, and this realization made me sick to my stomach. Browsing through all the true crime videos online, each one of them is uploaded with the creator's face right in the center, not the victims, but the people who are simply talking about it, sometimes even exaggerating it to garner more viewers. Their titles are all worded clearly, each one meant to draw people in. None of the titles are about the victims, just about the gruesome thing they had to endure, coupled with spooky music in the background, with people in the comments cheering on how interesting their storytelling skills are. Unless these YouTubers and podcasters are donating 100% of their profits from the videos to the victims' families and switching off monetization for videos of cases from many years back, none of the videos are made simply for awareness. I think some of these creators just see people's suffering and misery as just another way to fund their houses, their holidays. Someone died? Oh great, time for my new Birkin. These crime cases, the victims' demises, are simply not for these creators to tell, nor their money to make, and the worst part is that if these creators keep emphasizing the weird sickos than the victims, and then just perfunctorily saying thoughts and prayers to the victim and their families, and move on to the next video. And this is not even mentioning how some viewers like myself back then will slowly become desensitized to the horrific crimes because of how much true crime content we consume, and eventually treated these cases as gossip, treating it as trivial as someone being cheated on. After watching the overly sensationalized documentary, I eventually woke up and decided that exploiting the deaths and misery of strangers is just a system I want to be a part of anymore. So now, if you ask me if I still am interested in true crime cases, I can safely tell you that I'm not. If I ever chanced upon a case that interested me, I would just look for the news article. Maybe Wikipedia it. Facts may be a bit off, but the gist should be there, and no one would be profiting off it. At least I know I'm not actively contributing and encouraging people to keep profiting off strangers' death. I don't need to be listening to the gruesome details anymore. I just need to know what happened, and maybe see if there are any things I could learn from the case to prevent it from happening to me if I ever find myself in the situation, praying I won't though, and then move on. There are no reasons for me to view someone's tragedy as another episode on Netflix, as just another story to keep me company on a cold rainy night, and I will never allow myself to click on any true crime stories or podcasts again. It's one thing for journalists to report on the horrific crimes, they have to because it's part of their job scope. It's another for random people to retell the stories with the sole intention of getting more views to their page. Like I said, if you really need to know what happened, just read the news. or read what their families and friends may have posted. That's it. That's the basic amount of respect I think we owe to the victims and the victims' families of the unfortunate and unfair tragedies.